Okay, you see the.
All right, there we go. All right, thanks, Janice. Good morning and welcome to the UCCE Master Gardener program of Riverside County and Western Municipal Water District Water Efficient Landscaping Workshop. Today, the hosts are going to be Janice, who is a Master Gardener, and myself, Ryan Shaw, with Western Municipal Water District. So I'll kick it over to you, Janice, to introduce our guest.
Okay, before I get started, I would like to make mention of our Master Gardener program and some of the events that we have in Riverside County. Basically, we are trained volunteers that offer science-based information and who advise and educate the public on gardening and horticulture. We have information tables throughout Riverside County, usually at special events, at farmers markets, at lavender farms. We have them in Palm Springs, La Quinta, Corona, Temecula. We also have representation on the first Saturday of each month at RCRCD, which is a public land use learning center. And you are definitely invited to tour their 3-acre demonstration garden of sustainable practices. We will be here again on February 11th for our next workshop with guest speaker Brooke Sarson, and her workshop is on capturing H2O. Okay. Please submit your questions in the chat feature below. We will hold them to the end, and then we'll barrage Diane with all of the questions at that point. Let's see. I have information on Diane. Would you prefer to give us a little bit of information on yourself?
Sure, that'll save you a little bit. Good morning, everybody. I'm Diane Kennedy. I run Finch Frolic Garden Permaculture in Fallbrook, along with my daughter, Miranda Kennedy. I have been a permaculture landscape consultant and designer for about almost 10 years now. I have a food forest through which I give educational tours. I have an AA in landscape architecture and in sustainable landscape and turf management. I'm a QUEL certified landscaper, which is quality water efficient landscaper, irrigation certificate, and certificate in permaculture. Anyway, so what I would like to talk to you about today is about permaculture, obviously, about what it is, and then also I'm going to talk about the practices that you can have on your property quickly for getting rid of weeds, chemical-free gardening. And then we're going to talk about water capture towards the end, which is integral to permaculture. So let's get started.
Thank you, Diane.
So you're very welcome. Thank you. So permaculture is the term is a kind of a portmanteau word. It's permanent agriculture shoved together. So it's a collection of land use practices that are regenerative. And that means that it's not sustainable. Sustainable means let's keep it the way it is at the bare minimum. Regenerative is let's make it better. Let's heal. And that's one of the big differences between the organic gardening and permaculture. I am having little technical difficulties here. Just excuse me. There we go. My mouse was not working. So obviously nature didn't wait around for humans to crawl the mud and develop technology to create chemicals so that they succeed. So permaculture works on a nature-based observation system. We see how nature does, and then we try to incorporate that into what we do. So it's not man versus nature. We're not pitted against it and trying to wipe out other habitat so that man can succeed. We are working with nature for the benefit of all of life on the planet. we can leave the earth in a better condition than when we found it. So permaculture can be done on large scale farming. This image is of terraced farming, where these are hills and water is going down the hill. And these rows are all made on contour so that it's capturing water as it's rolling down the hill and being spread and sunk into the ground, rather than being planted on a plowed grid system with just relying on domestic watering. Permaculture can be made for farmland restorations. The same image, the same tree in the background there. This is only a handful of years after this monocrop and sprayed chemical farm was transformed back into a wild area with running water in it. Permaculture does not have to be a jungle. My place is kind of a jungle because I like it like that, my food forest, but permaculture techniques can be used for any style of garden. This is a succulent garden that I installed for a client. And this is a rainwater feature that sinks water. It looks good when it's dry, and it's also functional. It's not channeling water away from the property. It's sinking water safely away from the foundation and into the hillside that's below, which is helping all those trees that are below it have water the rest of the year. This is a snapshot of my garden. So certainly not a monoculture, a polyculture. Plants are planted so that they actually work together well. They are planted in guilds where they help each other to grow. This is a image of my yard before I went into permaculture. It's an 1.5 acres that is clay at the top, and then heavier clay, and then really, really solid anaerobic clay at the bottom from years worth of erosion. The water from the street and the neighbors' properties all funneled right through this property. And the previous owners had planted over 100 of these Washingtonian Phylloferas for, I have no idea why, but they pulled out a citrus grove to do it. So these were junk trees, but with permaculture, all of these were used back into the project. It's repurposing, recycling as much as possible. If you look at the lime trees down at the bottom, this is a picture taken last year. The lime tree is towards the bottom right there. It's a little bit over, but this is my garden now, which is now habitat. My daughter's identified 110 species of birds on her property, over 40 species of moth, over 40 species of butterfly, and we are absolutely man-made, chemical free. No herbicide, no pesticide, no concentrated fertilizer, and it's just she and I that care for it. So the thing with permaculture is that we feed the soil and not the plant. When we see a plant getting yellowed leaves, we're trained to go, oh, it needs iron. Let's go buy some iron and throw it on the ground. Not so. Microbes live in the soil, and they are what's the difference, makes the difference between dirt and soil. So under the ground, in every good teaspoon of soil, there are hundreds of thousands of creatures. In every teaspoon of soil, there are more creatures than there are stars in the visible sky. And they are microbes. So they're not visible to the naked eye, but they move all the way up larger and larger and larger. They feed on each other. This is the trophic cascade, and they go all the way up to animals. And then we are part of that soil food web. So if we destroy soil and turn it all into dirt with chemicals and grading, then we are killing ourselves eventually, because we are eliminating our food sources and our habitat. So one of the big differences between organic gardening and permaculture is that permaculture does not till the soil, because we would break up and kill off a lot of microbes and break up the mycelium, which are strands of beneficial fungus that are underground that link the roots of plants together and help them feed each other and care for each other. So we feed the soil and not the plants. If we see a yellowing plant leaf, we go, oh, something's wrong with the soil. So we do what we need to do to build the proper soil for that particular plant. So these are the major soil nutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the top three that are in concentrated fertilizer. These are some macronutrients, and there's more micronutrients down there. Below is the pH. This is acidic. In here is neutral, 6.5 to 7. And we're over here between 8 and 8.5 in most of Southern California. We are highly alkaline. It's not that we have less, like for instance, iron. We say, oh, it's yellowing plants, it needs iron. We have plenty of iron in our soil. However, it's bound up in an unusable way in the soil because of our pH. So it looks narrow. It's like a lock on the pantry door here. As soon as you start nudging your soil pH a little bit more towards acidic, it starts opening up, and then plants can get more of what they need out of the soil when they need it, as they need it. So how do you do that? You build the microbial collection of communities in your soil. You collect rainwater, which is slightly acidic, and that nudges you a little bit over. You don't have to be over here in neutral. You just have to be over a little bit for the plants to get more of what they need out of the ground, depending on what you're planting as well. So one way of doing that is composting. So from easy to energetic, you can do blender compost, and that's where you take a handful of kitchen scraps, throw it in your blender, fill it up with water, liquefy it, and pour that around the outside of your fruit trees. Do that once a month for every tree. You're putting nutrients back into the soil, and in a way that's not burning the roots, and you're feeding microbes directly. Give them a smoothie. Burying small, take your kitchen scraps, take a trowel, bury that stuff, move on the next day. It will, in our climate, that stuff will decompose in a few weeks. Of course, you'll get a lot of stray potatoes and squash and other surprises out of that. But all this builds tilth in the soil. Tilth is soil that has some air pockets in it, so that water can absorb in rainwater and irrigation water, and it allows roots to go through the soil. Turning composters, some people love theirs. I've seen that where it's turned into a soppy, heavy nightmare, but it just depends on whether that works for you or not. Cold composting is where you just have a bin and you throw stuff in, and you don't turn it, you just leave it. This can be very handy. You can move cold composting wire around where you're going to be planting. The best soil in your property is underneath your compost heap. So you can have a movable compost bin, or you could do hot composting where you make something that's at least 6 foot by 6 foot, and moist enough where you can squeeze a little water out of it. And you have to keep it moist, and that's very difficult in our climate. So you need to usually cover it. And then you turn the whole thing about every 3 days. With hot composting, you get almost the same amount as what you've mounded up, but it is a lot of work, and it does. You do need a lot of water to keep it going. Permaculture is another way to build soil and sink water and hold it into your soil. It is a German term. There's actually some umlauts over that U that are not there. It's dirt on wood. When you have old wood above the ground, it releases carbon into the atmosphere. You have a pile of wood. It's a perfect squirrel and rodent place, habitat. I see so many my clients, there's a grove and there's, fruit tree, big pile of dead wood, and squirrels you could not have have planned a better squirrel community. They can sit there safely in their pile and run off and grab the fruit and drag it underneath there. So instead, you dig a little hole and then you layer a layer of wood, you cover it up with dirt, you put another layer and then you cover that up with dirt. You make sure soil touches all of the wood. You don't just make a pile of wood and cover it up. That is called a rat house. So you layer it with soil. And then you usually do that in conjunction with water capture. So water is rolling down here, and this is a swale. And I'll talk about that in a moment. And that water percolates into the soil, and old wood becomes a sponge. And it holds that water. And as the soil around it dries out, it wicks that moisture out of it and into the surrounding soil. And any plants that are planted on or below that hugelkultur mound, now their roots can access moisture without being sitting in water. And also all this wood is slowly decomposing. So it's adding a lot of fungus to the soil, which is excellent fertilizer for hardwoods. And you're sequestering carbon in a user-friendly form so that plants can get to it. So all that dead wood that's sitting around can be hugelkultured. Bury it. It'll work for you in the soil. You can also, if you have raised beds where you're not going to be digging potatoes, you fill that thing up with layers of wood and you put dirt around it and then you layer it up, and you just need like 4 inches of good soil on the top. And then you plant right in that. And if you soak this wood before you put it in, it's even better. You can do hugelkultur in this kind of a trough too, where you put branches, there's mulch, there's grass clippings. This is kind of lasagna gardening, newspaper and cardboard, then compost, and you mulch the top to keep the weeds down. But all of this, all these disparate parts, they turn into gold during the growing season, into beautiful soil while you're growing on it. And this is how we have our raised beds. We always have one open and we throw all of our decomposables in there. Mail, clippings that are not going to resprout, like we don't put Bermuda grass in there. Old wood, branches, leaves, silt from the neighbors when it's washed in, whatever, chicken poo. We have a neighbor who rescues pigeons and they drop off a couple buckets of pigeon poo outside of our gate every week. We got the best stuff outside of our gate. All that goes in there. And then at the end, we put about 3 inches of good compost from another bed on the top of it and plant right in it. And over the course of the year, it becomes perfect soil. And then we're growing it at the same time. In pots in our climate are like little tangines. They bake the roots of the plants that are in there. So a way to prevent that from happening, from drying out, is to, well, one is to line the inside with cardboard. So it acts as a little, it's not shown in this picture, but acts as a little thermal barrier there, but also put wood in, put sticks into there, that plant, and then put good compost in there and then plant. These sticks are like long-term fertilizer, and they'll also hold water. And then you don't have to water your plant as often. This is a trench. A lot of hugelkultur is done above ground, but that's for repelling water and getting as much heat as possible in areas where it's colder and wetter. But we are the opposite. We need to do it in the ground. So this is a trench. Water flows this way across the property. These are my daughter's feet. And we filled it up layered with dirt, but there's old 2x4s, untreated 2x4s, building materials in there. There's with the nails on, they'll all rot. There's old cotton clothing and bedding in here that'll decompose. There's old wire that'll decompose. All this was layered into there and then covered up. And so when water goes down, it goes into this, and this decomposes over time and holds water, and it's not in our landfills anymore. And then that leads us to weeding. and leaves. When a tree is done with its leaves and it drops it, it's not really done. It's not a mess. It is fertilizer for the microbes that feed that particular tree. It's a system. So when we rake all that out and take it away to neaten it up, we are breaking that system and we're starving that tree. So we need to leave our leaves. Also, if you are weeding plants that will not resprout, you just pull them up, throw them underneath a fruit tree or in your garden bed. Every green blade is a vitamin pill, and you're taking all that nutrient and getting rid of it off of your property, whereas you can compost that instead and keep that nutrients on site. You are growing all of the fertilizer that you need in your garden. This is mulching. With every inch of mulch you put down, you reduce your watering by at least 10%. So we have citrus and avocados, all the subtropicals and tropicals. They have a very shallow root base that only goes down about 18 inches. And when we allow grass to grow up and we prune them way up so the light comes in, dries them out, we're stressing those feeder roots. And then we have issues with our fruit trees. So if you put on several inches of mulch around the tree and like a big donut, making sure that the mulch doesn't touch the trunks of the trees because you don't want to rot them, you now can reduce your watering by so much. You give it a good drink and you just let it go dry in between. And this will completely turn around the health of your citrus and subtropicals. You can also do this with all of your stone fruit and apples. They have deep tap roots that anchor them into the soil in areas where they've had blizzards and such. That's why they go dormant. However, they don't mind things growing up next to them, so you can mulch around them, but you can also plant really close to them and they'll be happy with that. But subtropicals and tropicals, they don't want anybody on top of their roots, so you mulch instead. Sheet mulch. Sheet mulch is where you put a layer of cardboard or newspaper right on top of your weeds and then add mulch on top of that. So this is my daughter. We put it on top of the weeds and we mulch. That not only protects our pathways and areas around trees from compaction, but it keeps the weeds from coming up. It sequesters moisture in the soil. So it also rainfall, any water falling on your property is as compacting as driving a tractor over the top of your property. So now water, if it's hitting mulch instead, it shatters and then sinks slowly into the soil and it holds it there. And then you get that marvelous fungus and something called dog vomit slime mold, which is amazing. And it's a cooperative effort between several entities and it's semi-intelligent. So look it up. There's a great TED talk on dog vomit slime mold and how intelligent it is. So watch that tonight after dinner. But sheet mulch is a great way. You use up all those newspapers and cardboard and put it on and mulch over the top of it. And you can use any mulch on top of this. So free arborist mulch is absolutely perfect for this. So pests, are they really pests? Identify things on your plant. Look at it to see if it's really a problem. I have people ask me, oh, I've got a couple of bites out of the leaves. What should I do? Should I spray it? Like, no. It's probably just an isolated incident. It's not hurting the plant. And just wait and look at it. So this little guy, this is the horrible looking little thing, but this is a dragonfly larva. They are aquatic and they will eat so many mosquito larvae and other creatures. And then of course, when they metamorphosize into dragonflies, they continue to eat what we don't like. This horrible looking thing is the ladybug larva. And he or she will eat far more aphids and other undesirable insects than the mature ladybugs will. These interesting little things are lacewing eggs, and lacewings are one of our beneficial insects. And they put them up on these little stalks because ants will come along and they won't see them. So they will pass by without eating their eggs. So if you see these, don't do anything about them, because that's you have lacewings. This is an ant and an aphid. And I have heard people go, oh yeah, the ants are killing off all the aphids on my tree. And oh, no. These ants, these are Argentine ants. And they will farm aphids on your plant and stroke them and get the honeydew off and eat that. And this will suck all the moisture out of your plant. So they are actually harming your plant by using as a farmyard. So you need to control the Argentine ants. This little guy is just an earth baby. He's just eating mulch. Just let him be. People are frightened of these and spray them and rake them out. Just let him be. This is one of our native parasitic wasps, and he is laying an egg in an aphid. So we don't have a native honeybee to North America. All of our honeybees, the colonial bees, are all imported for honey by humans. But what we have are hundreds of bees, wasps, and flies that are very tiny. This is my daughter's hand. This is one of our beneficial parasitic wasps. So if you saw that on your hair, you probably just washed it off because you'd think it would be a piece of dirt or something. But this is a beneficial. And what these guys need to survive are clusters of little flowers, like this is a buckwheat. You need a little flower to perch on safely, to sip a little bit of nectar, and have a whole food court really close together. So by integrating native plants and allowing some of your mints and other things with small clusters of flowers to survive in your garden, you're feeding all those beneficial insects, and that's your integrated pest management. So you don't need to spray. You shouldn't be spraying anyway. Your tropical milkweed, everybody loves the monarch. Please cut this stuff down to the base or replace it with our native milkweed that goes dormant. This will harbor over winter a fungus that when the next year's batch of monarchs, caterpillars come in, they will eat it and die from it because they don't go dormant. It's just too much exposure to what's on there. But the native narrowleaf milkweed and the showy milkweed and some of the other ones, they will go dormant, and so they don't have that issue. So if you have tropical, and of course they're beautiful in the fall and they bloom all the time, cut them down to the base in like October, and they will come up again. These are oleander aphids. They're fine. Don't worry about them. These appear on milkweeds a lot. They're not going to harm anybody. If you see them on a plant that you buy, that's good, because that means they haven't put a systemic insecticide in the pot to kill the aphids. And they will do that in the big box stores. You will have plants that are purportedly for pollinators and birds, but they have treated them with systemic insecticide, which does not have a short life. They don't know how long it lasts in the plant, maybe for the life of the plant. And then everything that bites that plant will die. So if you see some insects on a plant that you buy, that's a good thing. Most insects aren't doing any harm to humans. 1% of all insects are considered damaging to what we want, to food and houses and such. Plant in polyculture instead of monoculture. Monocultures just mean trouble, and it's excluding so much to the habitat. Interplant your plants with natives and flowering herbs. Water properly. Oh my gosh. So many consultations I go to, that the issue is either underwatering or overwatering or watering too much. So if there's a problem, look to your watering instead first before you do anything else. and provide for habitat so that birds like little bush tits will come in and they glean insects off the underside of the leaves of your other plants. So if you have birds, you're going to have fewer insect issues. So planting in a guild, which is underneath apples and peaches and the things that go dormant, you can plant all kinds of different plants, legumes that will set nitrogen and herbs that will attract or repel insects, and mining plants such as parsnips or carrots or comfrey that'll bring up nutrients from deep in the soil, and then their leaves then deliver that to the soil surface. You can plant all these things around trees in the same watering system and they will help them to grow. Please never use poisons. Please, please, please. When you put rat poison or mouse poison or gopher poison out, you will always, always have secondary kill. And this is, and I'm not going to go into it, but you can read it on my blog about a bobcat who, we finally found a bobcat on her property and it was fantastic. And they get mange, and then it's a long, horrible, horrible death. And I found her in her last moments and took her in to be euthanized. And I hike a lot, and there's those of us who are out in the parks and in the fields find the dead hawks and the dead owls from eating something that has been poisoned. So please don't use rat or mice poison. I'm gonna skip through that. Ground squirrels, they'd like to see where they go. So if you put in a barrier around your fruit trees where they can't see, they won't go in there. It works. It absolutely does. And it just needs to be around when there's fruit on the tree, that, few weeks in there. Gophers, use the cages underground. If you have to get rid of a gopher, the Maccabees or the snap traps, give them a fast, quick death. It's not they're native here. And it's not their fault that they're, in your yard. They're supposed to be there. We just don't want them. I've used gopher gassers where it usually doesn't kill them. It just keeps them out of an area away from some plants. And if it does kill them underground, it is not, and if something eats them, it is not lethal. There's no secondary kill. Rabbits, if you put a little barrier around things, they won't go in there. They won't jump over that. And deer and rabbit repellent really, really works. We don't have rain so frequently that it washes out a lot. So it does work. Deer, they don't like to walk on weird things. So you can put, wire around the ground to keep them away, or just protect young plants and allow some for the deer if you're lucky enough to have deer. Rats and mice. The rats that are our problems are Norway and black rats, which are here because we brought them in. The native rats build those nice little stick mounds in trees and such. They don't do any harm to humans or our habitat or get into our rafters or anything else. They are fine. It's these guys that do the issues. So I did have to at one point start trapping them because we had such a problem in our yard, and they were eating baby birds and girdling the trees and etc. So I started using snap traps to give them a fast death, and I put milk crates over the top so nothing else could get into those traps. And it was like 4 years ago now. I started the beginning of July and ended in the second week of August. So about 6 weeks, I caught 91 rats in just my vegetable area. So, and then we threw all of them. This is what this slide was all about. We put them out onto our embankment there, and this is a hawk eating one, and there was a turkey vulture that came and ate one, the bobcats, the coyotes, and they were eating good healthy food without any secondary issues. Birds, hang those old DVDs up, and that glitters around instead of Mylar. Mylar is terrible for the environment. And just the owls on a post in the middle, move them around. It really works to keep birds. Always expect about 10% for wildlife. Snakes, if you put the 1/4-inch hardware cloth around the base of your fence and down in a little bit, they will not come into your property. If you feed birds right next to your house, that seed is dropping on the ground, which attracts mice, and that attracts the snakes up close to your house. Please don't let your cats outdoors. I know this is unpopular. I have cats. I have had cats for decades. They are always in the house, and a lot of mine are ones that were outdoors and somebody let them go feral and we've taken them in. They do so much damage to the wildlife. So please keep your cat inside safely. We just found the headless body of a cat out in our yard. So yes, we have predators and we like the predators, but the cats need to stay in the create a habitat away from your home, like put a little dish out where there's a dripper away from your house, so there's some water, and animals will go to that rather than follow water up close to your house. And shelter and safe space. If you put a pile of rocks there, snakes and other things can go to that rather than seeking the coolness up by your house. So rainwater catchment. 1 inch of rain in an hour on an acre is 27,154 gallons of neutral pH-free water. Think of that. Even if we have a drought year and it's 10 inches, that's well over 270,000 gallons of water are falling on every acre. So the best place to put that water is in the ground. You can do all kinds of rain catchment, 50-gallon, 1,000-gallon. Those things will cisterns, rain barrels, they will fill up very quickly, and then you have to have a safe overflow for that water. But the best place is to put it in the ground. You plant the water. So one easy way to doing this, none of this costs a lot of money, is to do a swale. And a swale is a level bottom ditch run on contour on your property, and it's run perpendicular to the water flow. So water is flowing downhill. I don't know why that little image keeps popping up there. Water keeps flowing downhill and it flows into the swale and it collects, and then it spreads the length of the swale and sinks in gradually into the soil and downhill. So you do swales above your plants, and you plant downhill of a swale. If you do really large swales, like in pathways, every year that water goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And eventually between 5 and 7 years, if you capture enough water, you're now adding to the water table. But that water gradually seeps through the soil. And then months later, it reappears downhill and keeps our waterways wet and running and full of clean, purified water. So if you have a big property, you can certainly do this. If you have a smaller property, you can do it like above every tree, you put in a little fish scale swale. It's like a little smile, happy little smile. Water's rolling downhill. This is at a client's house, and this is all mulched now, but water rolls down and it collects in here, and then it sinks down and waters the root base of these trees. Instead of having a moat around it where water then goes away from the plant, or having just a ditch on or a mound down here where water's collected and then rolls this way away from the plant. This is the root of the plant. You capture water above the plants. And the smile goes uphill, not downhill. You're not trying to get rid of the water, you're trying to harvest the water. And you just do this with a shovel wide, shovel deep above every plant. I've now changed irrigation and let water seep into this instead of spraying all over this, and then surround these trees with mulch like we saw in the other image. Good deep waterings, very less frequently, and you have a very healthy and happy plant, and you're capturing hundreds of thousands of gallons of water every year into your soil. This is a property, this was just done last week. Ton of water coming off the house that's over here. Now there's 2 big rain catchment ditches. These actually should have been up a little bit more of a smile, but that doesn't matter so much on here. Filled them up with mulch. I can't even see it. This is this jacaranda is this jacaranda. Those rain catchment basins are right in here. The only reason to fill them up with mulch is so that people don't fall into them. But they're filled up with mulch. You can't even see them. You can walk on them, you can drive on them, but now water goes in here and falls into there and soaks into the ground rather than causing erosion down this slope. So I've used this in conjunction with capturing rainwater. The San Diego County has a rebate for gutters. I'm not sure about Riverside or Orange counties, what they're doing. But if you are trying to collect roof water, you can just dig a big hole and fill up with mulch and let that water go into that away from your house, and it sinks into the ground and slowly moves through the soil. And then that mulch will decompose slowly. And over a few years, then it's fantastic mulch. You dig it out, use it for compost, refill it with fresh bark chips. Don't use fine stuff in here, use the bigger bark so that you still have a lot of airspace in here for water to fill in. Really easy. Want to sink water? Dig a hole. So most what I talk about is on my blog, which is vegetarian.com. We also give tours through our property, March through Thanksgiving. I do a lot of public speaking. I'm not supported by anybody, so I'm not promoting any business or product. It's all my opinion for what it's worth. Also on my blog, I have a page that says resources for everybody, and we've bookmarked a lot of different fantastic books that I've vetted that I know are good. I'm sure there's more out there I haven't gotten to yet. I also have a Finch Frolic Garden YouTube channel where I've bookmarked amazing permaculturists talking on everything from restoration projects to erosion control to water sinkage to gardening, etc. So, and these are all bona fide experts, not just somebody who decides to do permaculture and films it and puts it on their YouTube channel and then, may not do it right. So anyway, so I'm going to stop share now and turn it over to questions.
Thank you, Diane. Fantastic presentation. We got a couple questions in the chat that I'll start off with, and then we'll open it up to the group for any further questions. The first question we got was from Tom Vineski. How do you water heavily mulched trees? Okay,
good question. I don't use the Netafim or any of the purported the drip irrigation. I find it really irritating. The hoses with the holes every 12 and 24 inches don't release enough water at a time to flood larger plants. And also with our heavy mineral content of water, those things plug up. And I have a lot of experience on that with my property where it was just an expensive disaster. So instead, I use either, the regular risers off of PVC, or I use black tubing with spaghetti strands, and I use the shrubblers. They're little heads that have a little bell-shaped amount of water that come out. The heads are easy to clean. You water deeply. And less frequently. So most plants want a good drench and let go dry. And you can use moisture meters to see if how moist the soil is, but moisture meters go bad. So you have 10 moisture meters on your body. Push the mulch aside, stick your finger in the ground. And if it is wet or moist 3 inches down, don't water that plant. Unless it's a riparian plant. If it's dry, then it's time to give it a good soak. So yeah, so that so often groves are on like watering a little bit 3 or 4 times a week. It's like, no, you're pushing all the oxygen out of the soil and you're washing the mineral away. And I can tell by the taste of the fruit. I can taste an orange, and I this a little high bitterness, high sweetness, not a good depth of flavor. Overwatering. It just washing all the minerals out of the soil. So with sheet mulch, physically, I water above the plant and let it soak under rather than a sprayer. If you have a sprayer and you want to do sheet mulch, then you put the cardboard in like a fan shape, so there's openings between it, and then mulch heavily on top of that, and then that allows the moisture to sink through. But soaking it and letting it run under the plant, if you have any kind of slope, is the best method for me. So, okay.
Thanks, Diane. Hopefully that answers your question, Tom. Next one we had was from Aaron Reese or Rice. Apologize if I get the name wrong. Are narrow leaf milkwood chickens safe? And Janice.
Narrow leaf milkweed chicken safe. Ooh, they're a part of, they have that toxin in there. I would not allow your hens to eat milkweed, because the point of them being eaten by monarch caterpillars is that they acquire the poison into their bodies so that other things won't eat them. So I would not feed narrowleaf milkweed to my hens.
Okay. Let's see, next comment in the meeting chat from Hetty Rothenberg. She says, thanks for the presentation. I have sheet mulch, but it doesn't prevent weeds. Is there a better sheet you can recommend?
Okay, so I put cardboard or newspaper, thick newspaper, right on top of the weeds and just mulch on top. If there are really strong weeds, like Bermuda grass will eventually work its way up through there, and Bermuda grass will outlive everything on the planet, I think, and it will, you know, when the planet explodes, it'll just go recolonize on Mars and adapt. But when it comes to sheet mulch, it's easier to pull up. We just keep mulching on top of it. But for most weeds that are light activated, like mustard and radish and a lot of others, it works fine. We just keep going over the top of it. Eventually, with enough mulch, those things stop coming up. So if there's dirt in the mixture on the top, then things will reseed on top. So you need to keep reapplying over the top. Landscape fabric, please don't use. It's got plastic in it. It never works. I'm always pulling up, and unfortunately, it can only go into the trash from places, especially underneath gravel. So cardboard or newspaper will decompose and feed the soil. But for the most part, it does work if you do it thickly enough in places. So.
Great, thank you. Next one from Cheryl Stradling. What kind of bark in the trench?
Oh, anything that's just really big chunk. The only point of putting that in there again is so somebody doesn't fall in there. Open is far better because you collect more water in there. You just don't want anything fine because you don't want to fill it up. You want water to go into that trench. So if you have big chunks of bark in there, so that people can walk through there and safely, and there's still a lot of pore space for water to go in, that's perfectly fine. Doesn't matter what it's from. So I get free arborist mulch. I know arborists and landscapers that have chippers and have them dump on my property. And you can also go to Chip Drop and other places. Or we used to, listen. If we hear the sound of a chipper, we go track them down and go, hey, we have a place you can dump, and you can, save you the dump fee. So it doesn't matter what goes in there as long as it's large. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Next question from Nancy Yoon. How do you control mosquitoes in standing water?
So if you are capturing water in the soil, it should be percolating in there. So that the whole point of swales and rain catchment basins, that it sinks down. If you have a contained area which holds water for a long period of time, people put mosquito fish in there. Unfortunately, the gambusia are would rather eat frog eggs than mosquito larvae, and they are classified as the most invasive fish in the world now because they're used everywhere. If you have an area that is completely contained and the water is not going to go into a waterway, and you don't care, go ahead and put some mosquito fish in there. However, if you have a pond that is it's not a chemical based pond, and you've got plants and you have other fish in there, the other fish and the daphne and the scuds and other things in natural pond water will eat the mosquito larvae down. If all of that fails, then if the BT I never pronounce it right, Bacillus thuringiensis, the BT dunks. It says it's not supposed to affect amphibians. I'm always very doubtful about this, but if worse comes to worse, put that in to kill off mosquito larvae. So
Great. All right. Next question from Melanie Stowworthy. Is there a way to utilize swales if my property is fairly flat?
Oh, you're lucky to have flat soil. So yeah, you just need to dig holes. Just dig holes so that water sinks in, the whole thing. If you see some of the historical photos and what they're doing in India too, in flat areas where it's dry, they dig pits. They dig flattened pits where they plant in the pit, and the pathways are raised. So if you have a raised pathway, the water falls into the planting area and harvests water, and it stays a little cooler down there too. So in traditional landscaping, it's all based on East Coast design, where we're trying to shed water. So we have raised planting areas and sunken pathways, and so we're shedding water and scooting it off our property. So if you work it the other way and have raised pathways and little bit sunken planting areas, then you can harvest water that way. Yeah, if you just dig pits around and fill it up with mulch, you're sinking water all over the place. But swales are mostly for capturing running water.
All right, we're running out of time, so I'll try and buzz through these quickly here. Next one from Bell Chang. Should I buy test kits to test different parts of the soil?
No.
If so, often how should I test?
Yeah, the only time it's if you can, if you're interested, but the whole point of doing that is so that you add chemicals to the soil to try to change it. The only time I have used any kind of a test kit is to test for toxins in the soil. Like I have clients in LA where they have a property on properties where there used to be a paint factory, and there's lead in the soil, and they cannot grow food in the soil. So the best thing you could possibly do for altering sand, for altering clay, for altering pH, for anything, is just to add organic matter to the soil. It's all about leaves. So the answer, I went through a hall of landscape architecture in Mesa College, and in all the classes, it all comes down after all the tests and all the studying. So add organic matter to the soil. So if you add sulfur to the soil, if you add gypsum to the soil, all that, they're temporary solutions, and you will never change your soil. You can only amend it for the particular plants that you're putting in there. So don't buy a bunch of stuff and put it in there, because all that concentrated stuff will kill microbes, and you will be ending up with worse soil. Add compost to your soil if your plants need that. If you have native plants, they don't need it. If you have fruit trees, they need it. So just add compost.
Diane, one quick question that I can combine, which is people are asking about ink on cardboard, cereal boxes. if that is okay to mulch.
Yeah, common question. Most of those inks are, if it's not shiny, are soy based. Absolutely fine. The very little of it will actually, if you think about the contaminants, very little of it's printed and that'll go into the soil, and your soil will clean that stuff up. So, but if it's shiny and highly colored, don't put that in. Also, I don't even take the tape off because I would be there forever on flattened boxes. I would never do it. I just flatten them out, cover it up. Eventually the glue dissipates into the soil and the tape comes to the surface, and I pick it up when I walk past because I've got other things to do. And I'm lazy. So good question. Most boxes are absolutely fine. The produce boxes that are coated with wax, absolutely fine. Stick it on there. The wax will disappear in the soil too. So.
And then one thing I'd like to add, we've had a couple of questions about viewing this presentation. So bottom line, it will be on the Master Gardener's website, and Ryan will have it available on the WMWD website. If you go to their site and look under Master Gardener's past workshops, you will also be able to view it there. So do we have any other quick questions? Did you see anything else, Ryan? Or do we?
No, I think you covered it. And for those that are still putting in questions, it's all recorded. So we'll be sure to address them once we post the presentation as appropriate.
Okay. Well, Diane, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And it's almost going to rain, so hot dog.
Exciting.
Yeah.
And
So
you have
get your shovels out and dig your swales right now.
It's the best time. Go out and weed. This is the best time to weed.
True. Yeah.
Isn't it? And you received many thanks in the chat. I don't know if you've looked at it at all, but
Not yet.
Many thanks from many people.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for tuning in.
Brian, do you have any websites you want to add handy that you know offhand? I was going to ask you to add the landscaping guide.
Yeah, I will put that in the chat for anybody who sticks around. Give me 1 second.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was trying to remember it and then I'm looking on my phone, but I'm figuring you have it on the top of your head. And then once again, Master Gardeners also have, if you have any questions, we do, if you go to Master Gardeners of Riverside County, we do have a helpline. Both for all of Riverside County. So we have West and East County. Okay. So it's been a pleasure talking to you, Diane. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, and let's see, I think we have that. And if everyone wants to take a look at the chat, we have the WMWD workshop. And you can find a lot of excellent information on their website. Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.